How has it felt coming back to horror after that sort of sojourn into superhero cinema?
I was so ready for it.
This April, Until Dawn is rising off of PlayStation consoles and into movie theaters everywhere, but the adaptation is going into the dark without a flashlight, telling an all-new story that fans of the game are very curious about. So I'm going to try to get them some answers right now. Here with me today are director David F. Sandberg and co-writer Gary Dauberman. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
The movie version of Until Dawn is telling its own story. It's going its own way. Where did that discussion start?
Well, it happened before me. I thought it was a great idea to do because, the movie or the game is already a movie. It's the most cinematic game that I've played, the closest thing to a movie. So it felt like doing the exact same thing would be just cutting out 8 hours of stuff and condensing it into a movie and removing the interactive stuff, and that wouldn't have been as interesting to me. But you can talk about how it came to be.
Yeah, it was a quick decision because it was I didn't want it to feel as if you're watching someone else play the game. We all know what it's like to sit on a couch where someone else has a controller and you're like, man, I just want them to die so they can hand the controller to me. You know what I mean? I didn't want that experience, the audience that had that experience in the theater. And it was really about, okay, so if we're not going to do that, we still want to be true to the spirit of the game, and how can we really explore the story further and push it further and expand the mythology, make the game part of a larger narrative. So that's kind of was the idea, not to completely push it aside and just go do our own thing. It was really to start building a world and building a sort of an Until Dawn universe.
It was more Until Dawn rather than the same Until
That's right.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another thing that I really appreciate about the look that we've gotten at the movie so far is this sort of jumping around from genre to genre. First of all, what is your favorite genre that you hit in the movie, for each of you maybe? And then which is one that you didn't get to that you wish you had?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think for me the favorite part is sort of there's, I guess you could say, a body horror section in it. I guess that's what we're going for there. That's my favorite. I don't want to give away at what happens in it, but the found footage was really fun too. And I was kind of surprised how much I liked sort of the slasher element, because I've never been the biggest fan of slasher movies. I enjoy them, but they're not my favorite horror subgenre. But creating that was really fun, and I felt like, I want to do more slasher stuff. That we didn't get to, I don't know. we hit some really fun ones.
I think it would have been cool to do a sci-fi horror, you know what I mean? Something like that would have been really, really cool.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but we saved something for the next time. But and I echo the body horror. I thought, one of my favorite horror movies is Descent, and I think we have an element of that in this that I really, really like and really enjoy. So that was fun to be able to play around in that world a little bit.
What? It's still in my face!
Can you give us any hints as to the in-world reason for the genre shifts?
It would be a bit of a spoiler, but it sort of has to do with sort of what's mentioned in the movie is what's scarier than not knowing what comes the next day. You cannot prepare. Maybe you're dealing with the slasher villain one day, okay, we know how to deal with that, but then the next day it's like a supernatural movie, and all those rules you just learned just go out the window. So it has to do with keeping people as afraid as possible.
The answer lies with Dr. Alan Hill, who is in the game and is in our movie, and sort of that connective tissue from one to the other. And I think he has the answer to the question that you're
That's
looking
very
for.
interesting.
Yeah.
There's something in the game that is obviously a central part of how that game is played, which is choice. It's cause and effect. How does the movie represent that theme of the game?
Well, that's what I think you guys did so brilliantly in the script, with having this sort of the day sort of starting over, but not in a Groundhog Day kind of way where it's it's the same thing over and over again, but it's different nights every time, different things trying to kill them, different villains, and so they can't really learn from what's happening in the same way as in movies like that.
Yeah, I wanted to, I think the choice, it's really about the character dynamics too, which is such a big part of the game, about how You know, it's like shifting perspectives of shifting POVs from one character to the other, and how they view one another depending on how they react to a different situation. I think that's, you know, inherent to all stories, but I think that's a major element for Until Dawn. Looking at what we didn't want to do, like a you know, sort of a repetition Groundhog Day pattern. I thought about how games have evolved too and become sort of this open world sandbox where it's not, you know, your enemies are also learning how you move and all that stuff in games now. So it's I wanted to bring that element from video games into this movie as well.
I want to know what each of your relationship is to horror in video games. Do you have like a favorite horror video game that you've played, or like something that immediately comes to mind when you think of that?
The Resident Evil games are great. I mean, I don't play a ton of video games, but I find horror video games in particular are often scarier to me than horror movies. I guess it's because you're in charge and it's not as much, you know, music sort of telling you what's about to come and things like that. But yeah, no, I've loved the Resident Evil games, Outlast, and of course Until Dawn. You know.
Yeah, it's hard not to say. You know, Resident Evil, certainly. You know, Dead Space, Alien Isolation, I enjoyed. You know, there's been a couple ones that have come out this past year that I really, you know, if you want to call the Alan Wake, you know, that,
sure.
Yeah, of course,
oh, yeah.
Right. There's been a lot of great horror in video games for, you know, forever, really. But
you two have obviously, this is not your first collaboration. You worked together on Annabelle Creation.
Yep.
How was it kind of re-teaming for this movie? Did you have a shorthand that you were able to work from out of that experience?
Yeah, I mean, Annabelle Creation has been one of my best filmmaking experience so far. Like the movie turned out great, and it was just a great shoot. So I've been like wanting to get back to that feeling, you know. And it's like, so when Gary reached out with this, it's like, yes, let's do it, you know.
Yeah, I think there is a shorthand, and you know, we brought along a lot of the same people back from Creation that we just, you know, we know and love, know they can execute, just have full confidence in. So there's not a lot of like, oh man, I hope this person's, you know, okay to work with. Like, we know everybody's great, and it's fun, you know.
Yeah, obviously, you got your start in horror, obviously shorts on YouTube and adapting that into Lights Out back in 2016. You've been in Shazam world for a long time until now. How has it felt coming back to horror after that sort of sojourn into superhero cinema?
I was so ready for it. Yeah, no, I've been like, I wanted to do a horror movie already after the first Shazam, but there was no time. You know, we had to go into the second one. And then after Shazam 2, I was like, well, I have to do horror. But then it was that kind of thing, well, what horror do I want to do? Like a slasher or supernatural or whatever. And then Gary came along with this idea and was like, this is perfect because I get to do all of it, you know? So it couldn't have been like a more perfect project to do after that. And it's a little different from the horror I've done before too, because we do explore all of these, and I also get to do a lot more sort of practical effects, which I was dying to do after, like, I don't hate visual effects in any way, but like after 2 superhero movies, it's like, I just want to do something where it's in camera, you cut it together, and you have a movie. You don't have to wait half a year to see like, oh, what'll it look like, you know? And it was just so fun. It's always been a dream of like having these, like all these prosthetics and fake bodies you can do whatever you want with. And like, we have like blood cannons and things like that with like compressed air, just shooting people with blood in the face, and you know.
Not a lot of compressed blood cannons on Shazam.
We had to cut them all out. They were like, put green blood in. I'm like, what are you talking about?
If we want to survive, we have to make it Until Dawn.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Until Dawn comes out on April 25th in theaters everywhere. Do not miss it. We have plenty more Fan Fest for you coming up. Don't go anywhere.